In the space of only a decade or so, Elon Musk has gone from being one of the cashed-up PayPal investors like New Zealand citizen Peter Thiel to being the world's most prominent entrepreneur, one of the three richest people in the world. The crazy genius of the age: Tesla, SpaceX, solar roof tiles, robo-taxis, hyperloops, talking up and talking down virtual currencies, inventing personal flamethrowers. Is there nothing he cannot do? There is a song about him, perhaps the first of many.
E-L-O and Elon Musk. E-L-O and Elon Musk. He is a real-life superhero conquering Mars. He's lighting with a flamethrower, riding electric cars. E-L-O and
Elon Musk's official job title at Tesla is Techno King. His tweets are legendary, like, "You have my full support" to Kanye West on the occasion of Kanye announcing a run for the presidency, which included his idea that vaccines are the mark of the beast. There was the pedo guy attack on the Thai cave rescue hero. He drew the ire of the US's Securities and Exchange Commission by saying Tesla shares were worth $420, which was a joke designed, he said, to amuse the musician Grimes, his girlfriend. He's also been perhaps the most successful gambler of the age in many ways. SpaceX had desperate early days, as chronicled in a book from earlier this year, Liftoff. Now there's another book that stays grounded. Tim Higgins has won a number of journalism awards in America and is an automotive and technology reporter for the Wall Street Journal. His new book is Power Play, Tesla, Elon Musk, and the Bet of the Century. Hello, Tim.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. The bet of the century is what?
Well, when Tesla was created in 2003, the idea that electric cars could go mainstream seemed improbable. But here we are in 2021, and it's looking not only probable, but very likely that the dawn of the electric car has occurred. And so when they made that bet, it was really a bet. It was a very risky venture. And the people behind Tesla clearly have been rewarded, but it wasn't a guarantee.
No. We're going to get into the not-so-nice Elon Musk. Shall we, though, at the start, give credit where credit is due, as you do in your prologue? Because it's one thing to create an online giant, like Facebook or Twitter. It's absolutely something else, as you say, to take on the biggest companies in the world with so many collective years of refinement and experience and commercial savvy, Tim.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people in the automotive industry thought that what Tesla was proposing was, while nice and maybe charming, was not going to be some kind of powerhouse to be feared. And in some ways that helped Tesla. It made people underestimate them. But on another part, it really underscores just the challenge of what the company was up against. Facing giants from General Motors to Volkswagen to Toyota, these are companies with generations of experience, war chests, dozens and dozens of products they already make, which they can iterate on and bring to market very quickly. This was a tough challenge. Bending metal is a tough business.
You remind us that Tesla wasn't Musk's idea, which still surprises people. He bought into it, as it were. His gaze was really fixed on outer space even back then, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It's not to say that he wasn't interested in the idea of electric cars or didn't think that there was a future there, but he was working on his rocket company at the time, SpaceX. He had made himself a nice fortune in the company PayPal, and he was kind of gotten obsessed with the idea of going to Mars. And when Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarping, they founded Tesla Motors, and they were out looking for investors, and they were having a hard time. This was going to cost millions of dollars, and the turnaround time on that investment was a lot longer than a typical Silicon Valley tech startup. But with Elon Musk, they found somebody who was willing to take a wild bet. And here was a guy putting money into rockets, and he was very interested in putting money into an electric sports car company.
Yes, why a sports car? Because several people had approached him from the EV car, hopeful car makers. Why a sports car?
Well, the idea was The general thinking among car companies was that people who were going to be interested in buying electric cars were going to be motivated out of a desire to save money on gasoline, that they were thrifty. And if you were going to appeal to that kind of subset of people, you were going to have to make it a cheap car. Well, the problem with electric cars at that time and even today is that the batteries are expensive and they make the vehicle more expensive to build than a comparative gas-powered vehicle. And so in order to make the vehicle approachable to somebody who was worried about cost, you just had to take so much out of the car that made it comfortable or make so many compromises that you were left with something that was not really that great. So why not start at the top of the market? Martin Eberhard, the co-founder, who was the CEO to start with, he had experience with sports cars and knew that sports car owners could make decisions that maybe weren't necessarily the most rational or logical. They could be persuaded to do something because it was cool or sexy or appealed to their bravado or ego. And so that's where they started. The idea was to start at the top of the market and bring that technology down cheaper, because you could sell a supercar for more money and you could maybe cover the cost of those batteries.
And that turned out to be a very clever idea. He put pretty well his entire fortune into Tesla, all that PayPal money in the end, didn't he?
It turned out to be a lot harder than they expected. And Elon just kept doubling down with his fortune. And in 2008, the company was in a lot of trouble, and he became CEO. And that's really when he started to put his vision, his stamp on the company.
Timing. God gave him the gift of timing. With the immense amount of government money he's been able to tap into, both for Tesla and for SpaceX, actually.
It's you bring up this interesting point that Tesla has been able to take advantage of governments around the world trying to encourage the adoption of zero-emission vehicles. If you were selling zero-emission vehicles, you were selling electric cars, you had a certain goal to do that. And if you didn't meet that goal, you had to pay the government a certain amount of money. But if you were selling more than you were required to do, you came up with credits, and you could in turn sell those to your rivals. And well, since Tesla was only selling electric vehicles, every car it sold essentially was worth more than just the price that was being paid. They could turn around and sell these regulatory credits to other companies. And that would be a very key thing that they would be able to do, is to help them become profitable ultimately.
Yes, so that was hugely advantageous, but he had to solve, and did, the huge problem of fire in electric vehicles. So how did Tesla go about that?
Yeah, the company was founded on the idea that the batteries they should use would be lithium-ion cells. And lithium-ion cells are these fat finger-sized batteries that at the time you found very commonly in laptops or camcorders. And the idea being that if enough of them tied together essentially could make enough energy to power a car. And you weren't going to just need one or two. You were literally going to need thousands of these cells arranged in a box and networked together and coordinated with software, and it was going to be a very elaborate kind of process. Well, as they worked on that, I'm sure you remember in early 2000s that there was a spat of laptop fires. Lithium-ion batteries can be very volatile. They started exploring, well, how big of a problem could this be? And they went to an expert, and the expert said, well, don't worry. Only like 1 in a million of those cells is just going to have a defect. You're not going to know if it has a defect, and it's just going to go into what we call thermal runaway. That means it just becomes so hot that it essentially turns into a firecracker. And the engineers looked at the cells and they said, oh, we got a problem here, because we're going to have thousands of cells in each car. So 1 in a million might not seem like a lot, but that means maybe 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 of their cars is going to have this thermal runaway. And one battery cell is going to set off all of those cells because they're tied together. And this is really the big key breakthrough for Tesla early on. This is the big technological breakthrough that gave Tesla an advantage against its rivals, figuring out how to manage the heat of those batteries so the cars wouldn't be dangerous.
And how did they?
they're in this box, and they fill the box with kind of a goop that goes around them that helps manage the temperature. And then what they do is they've figured out a way to, if one cell starts to get too hot, it spreads that heat over the rest of the cells in a way that nobody gets too hot. So very complicated, but also very elegant ultimately.
You ask in the book if Musk is an underdog, an anti-hero, a con man, a combination of the lot, the usual musings, although what interests you most is how he got it done, how he galvanised the world, in a sense, into adopting e-vehicles, especially the big car makers, which, as you say, didn't look likely to hurry with it even a few short years ago. If he isn't some kind of mad genius, what is he? How would you, Tim, describe him to someone who's never heard of him, who's just woken up from a long coma?
Yeah, it depends on the day if he's the hero or the villain. And he is driven by many things. One of those things is he likes to prove people wrong. I once asked him, I was once talking to him about a project he was working on, and it wasn't going well. And I said, well, people told you this wasn't going to go well. Why didn't you listen to them? And he essentially said to me, well, people have been telling him things were impossible all of his career. And look, he can land rockets when people said it was impossible. And so this is the tension that underlies Elon Musk, is that he has achieved what people said was impossible. And sometimes he is right. It is possible, but also sometimes it is wrong, and he's not listening to the people close to him or who are cautioning him against whatever road he's going down, and it gets him into trouble. Sometimes he's his own worst enemy, and that is kind of the dynamic in play with Elon Musk.
He's lucky, or does he make his own luck? Because he rolled the dice and he made the right numbers come up in a way. He is exceptional.
He is in the classic entrepreneur. In a lot of ways, he works to make his own luck. He knows when to take advantage of opportunity and is not shy about running with that. He subscribes to the idea of momentum. Like a gambler who's winning in a casino, keep rolling those dice because you want to keep the winning streak going. This is a key part of his kind of makeup. And he is also one who really does look at the odds. I've heard many stories from people who worked with him where he calculates what the probability of success is. And he has a risk tolerance that is a lot greater than most people. He is willing to put the company on the line on multiple occasions because he thinks that the odds of failure are slim, or he thinks that the odds of success outweigh the potential risk. And you see that time and time again throughout the company's history.
Tim Higgins is with us. Power play, Tesla, Elon Musk, and the bet of the century. One big question is whether his seemingly aberrant behaviour as a CEO is a great PR and I suppose at times diversionary strategy in an age where little is shocking, and celebrity is paramount and so on, because he has mastered that art if it is all deliberate.
Yeah, it's this interesting dynamic for Tesla. It's so hard to separate Elon Musk from the Tesla brand. The two are almost intertwined in a way that you don't see very often with major publicly traded companies. And on one hand, that's great for Tesla. It allows him to use his celebrity and the power of celebrity to build a brand, to direct customers, to avoid having to pay for advertising, to spotlight things that he wants to spotlight, whether it's new products or new features. And this is very powerful. Competitors are very jealous at this ability. On the other hand, his personal life and his companies are so intertwined that if he's having problems, he's oftentimes airing them to the world, and it can appear at times that he's unstable, or that can be unnerving to investors at times and puts the company at risk.
We're in an age, though, which accepts, tolerates, even admires that a lot more than previously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you compare the General Motors Volt, as you do, with the Tesla Model 6, both were Motor Trend cars of the year. Don't you have to say it was the Musk mystique that made the difference in sales? Because media and influencers wanted Musk to succeed, didn't they? They wanted, I don't know, an anti-hero hero. They wanted another Henry Ford figure at the forefront of American know-how. There were a lot of factors in play here.
And it's interesting. It gets to this notion that the Volt, GM's car, in some ways was built to appeal to a person who wanted to save money on gasoline. Whereas the Model S was the driving idea behind this was that it was going to be the best car out there that just happened to be electric. And as Elon, as CEO of the company, that had some power behind this idea. That he kept hearing these managers who'd been hired from Detroit to work on it. They had a marching order to make a $50,000 car. They were trying to keep the costs in line. And Elon was just couldn't understand it. He was so frustrated. They would say stuff like, well, we can't, this is going to be too expensive. This one will miss our budget. Once he became CEO, he got rid of a lot of those people. Those cost constraints went out the window. It was now building a car that would appeal to him and his taste. And once that vehicle comes out, it's not a $50,000 car. It's more like $100,000 or $120,000 US dollar car. And this is one of the things that's underappreciated about Tesla. He was able to raise the money to bring this car to market. Not a lot of people would think that there was a huge market for people who wanted an electric car that happened to be $120,000.
When you will things into being, though, as he is capable of doing, you've got to sell a vision of the future, and you've got to polish it up. And, of course, the vision doesn't always correspond, in his case, with the reality, does it?
And that vision has to become more ambitious and more bold at every year, because the amount of money that Tesla needed just kept growing and growing and growing. And then to justify those valuations, you really have to be doing a lot as a company. It goes from selling a few thousand cars a year to talking about millions of cars a year. And sometimes it would seem he gets a little over his skis on what he's projecting. And that is definitely playing out now as we hear this debate about the company's claims, Elon Musk's claims about their ability with self-driving technology. And we see the company has something called autopilot, a driver assist feature out there that some in the auto industry doesn't have enough safeguards to prohibit or prevent people from misusing it.
He's thin-skinned. You can tell that from all his responses, or empathetic, actually, is another way of describing it. You can tell that from all his responses to people on Twitter. And he has a hot temper, even though he's the epitome of laid back, usually in public. In your book, he screams at people, he fires them, and sometimes he fires them for being completely right.
Yeah, it's working for him by all accounts is not an easy thing. On one hand, I've talked to people who, they talk about how he can be charming and funny and really engaging and very kind of motivating and exciting. On the other hand, he can be a real tyrant, screaming at people. Managers would train their people on how to talk with him to make sure they try to avoid them getting fired. Don't tell him no, tell him you'll get back to him. These sorts of things. Really something that would oftentimes set him off. Examples throughout the book is this kind of suggestion of somebody telling him something wasn't possible. He subscribes to something called the first principles approach, which comes from physics, which really gets to the idea of boring down to the kind of the pure essence of a technical problem. You don't want to, in his mind, do something just because that's always the way it's been done. There might be a better engineering solution, even if it's harder up front.
When you say in the book, while Musk's vision, enthusiasm, and determination carry Tesla, his ego, paranoia, and pettiness threaten to undo it all, is that still on the cards? I mean, will we cease being entranced by him? Because everyone's into EVs now, and charismatic figures succeed by carrying us on an enticing journey, but sometimes that journey gets bogged down or they crash.
Well, you hit on this kind of important point. The company coming out of 2020 or mid 2020 has probably never been in such a good situation financially. It had been able to raise a lot of money very cheaply because of success that it had through the early parts of COVID and opening a factory in China. And investors had a lot of enthusiasm for Musk's vision and for the fact that he had finally seemed to show that he could execute. But that's the challenge going forward, is that he's bought himself some time, but he needs to show that Tesla can execute going forward against all these competitors that are wanting to eat his lunch. And they've struggled with execution. They've struggled with bringing out products. They've struggled with opening factories. And these are things that even to this day, they show signs of continuing to have a hard time kind of getting into the next stage of being a big company. And so his personality can only carry them so far. Learning how to execute is really going to be critical.
There's a nice quote from you in the book. Tesla was building the airplane as Musk was heading down the runway for takeoff. And several of the people who bumped up against him in his own company are now running their own companies in competition. So actually, Tim, the Genius of the Age title hasn't yet been awarded.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. He's such a good recruiter, or such a good scout of turning up good talent. Yet on the other hand, he burns through people so quickly, and some of those really good people have now gone on to be in a position of rivals that they could be, they could be his undoing in the future. One of the key engineers that helped bring out the Model 3 is now at Apple working on their car program. One of the key engineers behind the Model S is now running a company called Lucid Motors. Really, in a lot of ways, the next generation of the Model S there. One of the engineers behind the early days of the autopilot system is now at a startup that's worth billions. The company can't only be Elon Musk. It needs to develop a bench of executives to take some of that burden away from him. And he's clearly tired of being the CEO in the terms of like day-to-day management. He wants to think big picture and work on engineering. And he's just never found anybody that he feels like he can trust to hand over the reins to be that number 2 position to help him out of the parts of the job that he doesn't like. But make no mistake, he still wants the power. He still wants the control of Tesla and of SpaceX. These are his creations in his mind, and he wants to run them like they're part of something I like to call Elon Inc.
Elon Inc. And you wouldn't bet against him, would you? That's the thing.
Well, it's going to be a brutal fight into the future, and you can see the battles, the battle lines drawing here. GM and Mercedes and Volkswagen are ultra aggressive and rushing forward electric vehicles, in large part because they have no choice with the regulators in China and Europe pushing the automakers towards that electric future. They have to be able to have product to compete. And this is the next generation's fight.
Power play, Tesla, Elon Musk, and the bet of the century. We've been talking to Tim Higgins. A couple more things. Musk says most, but not all, of your book is nonsense. Has the nonsense been specified?
Well, it's interesting. He went on Twitter and said that I managed to write a book that was both false and boring. And the boring, we'll start with that. It's in some ways a compliment, because in the past he has often called something boring that was very important to the company. And I think of 2018, the company is in trouble, and Wall Street analysts are asking him some very spot-on questions about the finances of the company. And instead of engaging, he blew up and famously called them boring bonehead questions. And really want to just talk about the future, whether it was new battery technology, autonomous car technology, whatever was going to be in the future. If Elon Musk was writing his own book, it would be about the future. There's only one thing he's pointed to that he claims is false. And there's an anecdote in the book where the company is in trouble yet again, and he supposedly tells a story of a conversation he had with the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, and in that retelling of the story to some of his team, he says that Apple approached Tesla about acquiring the car company, and Elon says that on one condition, he wants to be the CEO. And Tim Cook says, well, sure, you can be the CEO of Tesla under Apple. And in Musk's retelling, he says, no, I want to be the CEO of Apple, to which Apple CEO Tim Cook very angrily says something that's probably not appropriate for a family airwaves, and then hangs up the phone. Well, in my book, I tell this anecdote with great skepticism and point out that Tim Cook says he's never spoken to Elon Musk. And whether or not Elon Musk has ever had that conversation isn't the point. And because either Elon was telling the truth to his employees back in the day, or he's telling the truth now when he says he's never talked to Tim Cook. That point doesn't matter. What matters is he was sending a very important message to his team that he was the CEO of Tesla. Tesla was not going to be acquired by Apple. There was no white knight coming. They needed to solve the problems to keep the company afloat. And that really is at the heart of the book.
Will he have ended up helping the world get greener, or is he just a small part of that in the hugeness of that progress?
He definitely has played a huge part in ushering in that conversation. You know, if there was no Tesla tomorrow, I think it's fair to say that Elon Musk and Tesla won the day on the vision for the future of the car. We are on the dawn of this new era of the electric car.
So we have a lot to thank him for. He's forsaken the mansions we hear just finally, Tim. He's now living in a tiny $72,000 prefab in Texas. Can we believe that?
He definitely does not live the life of a normal billionaire. Depending on the day, he's the world's richest man. He did give up his mansions, but make no mistake, he's still living a life that's much different than the average Joe. He flies the world in a private jet. He has a staff, an army of people at his beck and call. But it gets to it underscores kind of this mission-driven guy that he is. He doesn't spend his time lounging on exotic islands, drinking cocktails with umbrellas in them. He's working on his passions, and that's, at the moment, he's spending a lot of time working on rockets to go into outer space, to go to Mars. This is what consumes him. And, you know, that's clearly his passions.
Good to talk with you. Well done on the book, and thank you also for your time.
Well, thank you. It was a delight.
Tim Higgins on Elon Musk.